Hi, this is Yogeshwar 7000 again, and I'm back with a very widely discussed topic which has been discussed over several times by several astrologers. But I thought, let me give you what I think about this. And today we are going to be discussing about the sati period, Saturn's or Shani's sati period, which is a 7.5 year period of Saturn, the most dreaded period of Saturn as per the scriptures and as per various astrologers. And personally, I have a belief in that. A lot of astrologers say that no, Saturn sati does not make any sense. Just don't worry about it. There's nothing called a sati or a 7.5 years period. But based on my experience and based on other astrologers' experiences, and based on a lot of case studies I've done, yes, it does make a lot of sense. And it is believed that it is dreaded because this 7.5 years period brings with it a lot of challenges, and astrologers have attributed this to Saturn being a planet of discipline, Saturn being a very, very karmic planet. And as a matter of fact, it is good that Saturn does enter in our lives through sati, because what it does is it cleanses us a lot of sins which we have accumulated in our past lives and which we are accumulating in our present lives as well, because of the day and age and because of the lifestyle. We actually do not even realize what may seem to be unethical. We can very easily justify that as an ethical thing. So a lot of bad karma is being accumulated, and we should thank Saturn that it does come in our lives, punishes us for our bad deeds, and sometimes it does reward us as well for our good deeds, and kind of cleanses us, because if the karma gets accumulated too much, and there will be a time when we may not be able to handle it. So yes, this Saturn comes in our lives when Saturn comes 12th from where our natal moon is placed, and it continues for 7.5 years, because Saturn, as we know, that stays in one zodiac sign for about 2.5 years, and it continues to go on for 7.5 years in the three zodiac signs. How we calculate it is that Saturn sati starts when Saturn enters 12th from the moon. The next 2.5 years starts when Saturn is transiting right where the moon, our natal moon, is placed. And the next 2.5 years is when Saturn transits the second from where the natal moon, meaning where the moon was placed at the time of our birth, is placed. So this continues for 7.5 years, and it's the most important period because it brings with it a lot of challenges, a lot of pains, a lot of struggles, and all the challenges as we just discussed. Now, this Saturn sati, normally we have lifespan of about 70 to 80 years, max 90 years in general. I'm not talking about exceptions. So it normally comes 3 times in our lives, because as we know that Saturn stays in one zodiac sign for 2.5 years, and it comes back to the same zodiac sign exactly after 30 years, approximately 29.5 years later. And since it's a 7.5 years period, sati comes in our lives every 22.5 years, because 7.5 years gets finished, and then after 22.5 years it comes back to the 12th zodiac sign from our natal moon. So normally in all our lives, assuming that we have a healthy lifespan, it comes in our life for 3 times. And a lot of people say that the first sati comes, or 7.5 years comes, and it is more challenging to our parents, not to us. So it affects our parents, and a lot of people have seen that it has affected the parents in terms of their ill health. Some people may have lost their parents, and then the second sati comes as far as the own self is concerned, which comes after 22 and a half years after the first one. And the same astrologers say that the third and the final sati, or 7.5 years period, comes and affects more than one's own self. It affects their children. As we all know that we are all connected, to our parents, to our relatives, friends, children, especially to our parents and children, because we have a blood connection with them. So, and even a karmic connection with them, because we all get born and reborn and get connected to our own relatives. But that's a different topic. We can discuss about that in some other video. But that's what the opinion of certain astrologers is. And some people say, however, that if Saturn is well placed in somebody's chart, it does not affect the Saturn sati is not as challenging as somebody who has ill-placed Saturn. Like, for example, some people say that, well, if Moon is sitting in the zodiac sign of Aquarius, even then the Saturn sati is not that challenging. Some people say that if Saturn is a Yogakaraka in somebody's Kundali or horoscope, a Yogakaraka you would have seen in my other videos on Yogakaraka, or if Saturn is very well placed in a trine house or in an angle house, or if Saturn is the Lagna Lord very well placed, then Saturn sati does not affect them as much as other zodiac signs or other ascendants. And I would agree with them to some extent, because people with the ascendant lord of, say, for example, a Mars, Saturn would be more unfriendly, I would say, to them, as compared to somebody with a zodiac sign of an Aquarius or a Capricorn per se, or if somebody has a ascendant of a Libra, for which Saturn, or if somebody has an ascendant of a Taurus, for which Saturn becomes a Yogakaraka. But I may only agree with this to some extent, because Saturn sati, or 7.5 years period, is not just about Saturn. It's actually about Saturn and Moon. And why do we not consider Saturn sati, or 7.5 years period, from the Lagna? Like, for example, why don't we consider Saturn to be extremely dangerous when Saturn comes 12th from the Lagna and continues until 2nd from the Lagna for 7.5 years period, as compared to when Saturn comes 12th from the Moon and continues until 2nd from the Moon? Why is Saturn more dangerous or more harsher when Moon is being considered? Or why do we consider sati from the Moon Lagna? So and that's the reason why I just mentioned that it's not just about Saturn. It's about the relationship of Saturn with Moon. So what basically I'm trying to tell you here is that the relation of Moon and Saturn is not all that great. As you know, you would have seen in my other videos about Vish Yoga, or maybe I've not done a video on Vish Yoga. Vish Yoga is when there is a conjunction between Moon and Saturn, and it creates poison. That's why it's called Vish. Vish means poison in Sanskrit. So it's Saturn sati per se is a connection or a relationship between Moon and Saturn, and not just about Saturn. And as you know that Saturn, even in the scriptures, it is mentioned that Saturn becomes extremely dangerous once it enters the star constellation or nakshatra called Rohini. And it enters Rohini nakshatra after every 30 years. The scriptures say that kings will be affected and kingdoms can fall when Saturn enters Rohini nakshatra. And the scriptures also describe that King Dashratha was the father of Lord Rama, and the scriptures say that when Saturn or Shani was about to enter Rohini nakshatra King Dashratha knew about it, and he worshipped Shani because he knew that what kind of problems and disasters Shani or Saturn can bring when it gets into Rohini Nakshatra. So, and Rohini Nakshatra, as we know, is ruled by Moon. So it's about the relationship of Rohini, it's about the relationship of Saturn and Moon. And whenever there is a conjunction or whenever Saturn affects Moon, then there is a disaster. So the story goes on to say that King Dashrath worshipped Shani or Saturn, and pleased with his prayer, Saturn did not enter Rohini while King Dashratha was ruling, or it did not affect Rohini during its transit to the nakshatra called Rohini. It did not affect as much as it would have had Dashratha not worshipped Saturn the way he did. And then, of course, there are remedies where there's something called Dashratha Shloka, or a Stotra rather, which some astrologers do recommend as an excellent remedy for Saturn related troubles, especially related to sati, or especially related to whenever Saturn is ready to enter Rohini Nakshatra. And once again, Rohini, I'm trying to highlight here that it is ruled by Moon. So it's about a relationship of Saturn and Moon. And I also explained to you about how Vish Yoga is created when Saturn actually is in conjunction with Moon, and it creates Visha, or poison rather. So it's more about Saturn and Moon, and it's more about the mind getting affected rather than the real self getting affected. So when Saturn enters 12th from the Moon, there's a feeling of loss more than the real loss. And of course, there is a real loss as well. There is a loss of confidence because Moon is all about confidence, and Saturn is affecting Moon very, very adversely. So also, while considering what effects Saturn's sati is going to bring to your life, you have to look at what zodiac sign is Moon placed, and look at the Lagna chart from there. What house does that zodiac sign represent? And you will notice that as Saturn gets closer to Moon in that zodiac sign represented by that particular house, the effects or the significations of those houses will be adversely affected. That's one. And of course, the significations of Moon per se are also going to be very, very adversely affected. And what are the significations of Moon? There are several. Mental peace, of course, that's one. Mother, that's number two. And several other things you'll go into, and I'll recommend go into my other videos which describe significations of planets. So look at the signification of Moon and see how sati is going to affect adversely those significations. And then again, once again, I'm repeating myself here, that look at what house is represented by that particular zodiac sign from the ascendant, and that particular signification of that house is also going to be affected as Saturn gets closer and closer to Moon. So while it's 12th on the Moon, it may not be as much. While it's on the Moon itself, transiting on the Moon, it will be felt much more. And then while it's leaving in its last leg, which is the last 2.5 years from that particular zodiac sign, which is representative of that particular house, look at the significations and you'll see a slight improvement there. And of course, there may be other astrologers who may not agree with me, but that's what I've felt during my studies in astrology and my case studies while I've been reading charts. So I'll recommend go and do some case studies and see what you see as far as the effects of sati are concerned, related, one, to the significations of Moon, and second, to the significations of that house which is represented through the Lagna chart or the natal chart or the Rashi chart. And you'll see that your calculations or your consultations for professional astrologers may be a little more accurate. Now, some astrologers have also mentioned that Ashtakvarga. And if people who do not know what Ashtakvarga is, please refer to my video on Ashtakvarga. And and you'll see there's a matrix where in front of Saturn there are 12 zodiac signs, and each zodiac sign has been allocated points from 0 to 4 points, or 0 to 4 bindus. And according to some astrologers that look at the bindus or points in those zodiac signs. So whenever there is a sati or a 7.5 years period, look at how many points are there in that particular zodiac sign. And if those points are less, meaning which if they are 0 or 1 or even 2, then the effects of sati and the pain is going to be affected or felt a little bit more, as compared to if the zodiac sign has, in which Saturn enters, if the zodiac sign has been allocated higher points as per the Ashtakvarga bindus or points, meaning which if the points are 3 or 4, then the effects are not going to be felt as much. So this was a little discussion on Saturn sati. My own opinion that yes, it is not about Saturn, it's more about the relationship of Saturn and Moon, and how it affects Moon and how it affects that house where Moon is placed. And I've also explained it through an example of when Saturn enters the nakshatra Rohini, or the star constellation Rohini, which is ruled by Moon. So I've tried to explain to you how there is a relationship there as well. An adverse relationship produces a lot of pains, and of course it's all about the mind. It may not be about what actually you experience. And if you basically will see that in our lives as well, that you win if your mind wins, and if you lose if your mind loses. So self-confidence, and that's what's represented, a significator of Moon, gets affected adversely during the Shani sati or 7.5 years period. Now coming to remedies, of course there are several remedies, but I'm not going to get into remedies because that's a very tricky subject. What remedy may be effective for one may not be effective for the other one, and we may have other videos in detail about discussions on remedies. But as you know, a general remedy, prayers to Lord Saturn, yes, that of course will not harm at all. Prayers to Lord Shiva, because Shiva is connected very closely with Shani. Some people say that, or some astrologers feel that Saturn is nothing but an ansha, or a part of Shiva itself. So prayers to Shiva definitely will help. But like I said, you know, I don't want to get into details on specific remedies, because specific remedies can only be prescribed based on what lagna you have, where your moon is placed, so on and so forth. But it's always good to consult a good Vedic astrologer for remedies. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I'll be back in my next session with another interesting topic. In the meanwhile, I'll recommend subscribe to my channel and check out my website. There's a link below, and I will see you soon. Thank you.